Alrighty, hello every folks, and welcome to a bit of a mechanical breakdown and second Q&A kind of thing when it comes to Tactics Ogre Reborn, to once again address weird assumptions that I've seen flying around left, right, and center. Alright, so first things first here. When it comes to the whole actual system of the game, bizarrely, there's been this assumption from a very loud minority lately that somehow this is like a emulated port or whatever else. No, as someone who's basically gone and played this on pretty much freaking everything that you can play it on, no, there's not a single emulation quirk in sight here when it comes to this whole version, and you can pretty clearly tell that it seems like they've just gone and rebuilt a lot of stuff, not exactly from the ground up, but mechanically stuff has been reworked very thoroughly. Again, I can only cover up till Chapter 1, but, not the least of which is the fact that a lot of the skills are merged in different ways, the fact that a lot of the, things just straight up work differently, the fact that there's mechanics that were plain not there in the original version. So, it should pretty much give you a general idea that no, there's no possible logical way that you can possibly explain that this would somehow be some emulated port. That makes no sense whatsoever. Anyway, so as far as other big brain hot takes, there's been the weird thing I've seen come up a lot over the health bars of it's like, oh no, the health bars are too big. Has it become casual? I can't cover past Chapter 1, but let me just tell you that there's I've again been playing this thing for over a decade, and the fact that I've regularly had at least one casualty in Chapter 1 should tell you something. Granted, in a lot of cases I will play in pretty dumb ways, but yeah, no, it definitely has not taken that particular route. But what it has done is remix a lot of stuff in interesting ways. So, for example, I love that. I love that right there. I wanted to show that right there. This is a little bit of nuance that might be missed, but this is the level of quality of life that I love about this game. Okay? Again, I cannot cover past Chapter 1, but the fact that the game realizes that, okay, you're going to shield bash, you want some knockback off this, but that guy's got pincer. So you know what? We're going to take the effects that would have stacked up in the back, use your imagination on what else this might apply to, but I went and did a shield bash. He wouldn't normally be knocked back, but instead, the guy that hit him with the sword ended up stopping the hit. He ended up stopping him to take the pincer, and then the pincer got the knockback instead. That is how deep we're talking in terms of where they actually went with reworking things. Stuff is mechanically worked in unbelievably elegant ways. Things will just sort of happen that you never would have expected them to think about, okay? I wish I could cover beyond Chapter 1 because I would be gushing about this stuff for 100 videos straight. Anyway, so that should give you a basic general idea over how deep they've gotten with that kind of stuff. Now, another thing I saw in the last video is for some reason this assumption that the AI turned dumb, which, granted, the AI in the PSP version wasn't necessarily dumb, but it was unbelievably overloaded. The thing just straight up had too much stuff to think about. But what people misunderstood in that last video is not that the AI was being dumb, but that I told it to go hit stuff with sticks. See, I didn't think that folks would actually get, that into the weeds about it. Granted, that's entirely my bad. But when it comes to the AI, you have 4 different modes for it, which generally do their job 100 times better than they did in the PSP version. But what I did was set them all to the aggressive attacker stance. Why? Because they train cudgels faster. And what I was trying to do is just kind of create a little thing to show off in the background while I was talking about those particular classes, so that they would just run up and hit stuff with sticks, and it would be funny. But again, naturally the hot takes started flowing in, oh no, the AI doesn't know anything better to do than run in and charge with sticks. Are there certain situations where, if they've got nothing better to do, they'll go for a stick bonk? Sure, but I will note that throughout Chapter 1, it has been pretty good about adapting on the fly. In fact, it's been a pretty funny thing to see that depending on the spells that you give Kashua, she actually will act differently. Like, if you set her to just her usual state, she will hang back and she will heal, but her class can equip Spirit Surge. You put Spirit Surge on her, suddenly she's just running out and just, like, lasering people left, right, and center. You can't affect her AI. Her AI is her own, and it is hilarious to just suddenly see her going all hyper-aggressive. So yeah, that's just fun to play around with. When it comes to just how the AI would function normally, if I had set for example, healers to Mender, they would hang back and heal. If I had set them to Defender, they would basically set up a like defensive line up front and attempt to recover health as much as possible, making more use of shield bashes. If I were to, for example, set them up in the Distant Striker role, they probably would get a little confused because they don't really have anything to do with that. But still, you know, it's something that they could do. Anyway, so as far as other little things go, I want to point out here that when it comes to some of the some of the cooler quirks of the system or whatever else, there's been a lot said about the health bars. Okay, and as you saw right there, we did well over 100 with a shield bash. I think you'll be fine, but there's been a lot of assumptions on on staring at any one individual mechanic. And assuming that it is suddenly going to be, you know, entirely different or entirely cheesable. If there's one message I can get across without being able to cover anything else, do not judge a single mechanic on its own. Not a single one. Because everything depends. Everything is just a sliding factor combining with something else, okay? Again, I cannot cover beyond Chapter 1, but if folks wanted to know, like, for example, even if the tiniest stuff was still there, like, for example, if I were to go and hit this lady with a stick, would she still learn, you know, how sticks function a little bit better? Well, let's take a look. I went over that. She had 36.3 before, and now she's got 42.5. Yes, even the tiniest things still matter. And yes, actually, the XP will change depending on what's happening. So, for example, you get half XP for getting bonked over the head with a stick, but you get full XP for hitting somebody else with a stick. You know, either way. Point being, I don't believe that there's a single thing that I can talk about that I've run into that they have overlooked in any dang way, and it's shocking, quite frankly. Okay, so back to the health bars. What was I talking about there? Well, when it comes to the health bars, there was the assumption that everybody has been made into a damage sponge, and that's not the case. Basically, the ranges are pretty much the same as they were before, but the armor is higher because everybody is carrying twice as much armor. Okay, please bear in mind, again, the stats, damage, everything else does not work like you think it does. And yes, this is assuming even if you play the PSP version for quite a while, because they've actually put some kind of classic mechanics in there too. Which, by the way, these little challenges, I know, I keep backstepping, just give me a second here, I'm getting to a point, I promise. These little challenges, I saw another interesting hot take that it would be made dumb so you could pursue challenges. Just, no. Stop with these assumptions. No. Just chill out and wait for more news. It's good. Just you're gonna have to take my word on that one. But no, the challenges are just there to give you a little cookie, okay? You get a little thing there, like right here. What is the purpose of this challenge? Well, they could have given you a light charm as a drop, but instead they're like, okay, learn to use a buff, you know, pick up a buff card, make sure to heal somebody, all that kind of thing. Oh, hey, look, you know, you suddenly realize, you know, somebody can be, you know, maybe a light augment kind of thing, and now you switch them over to light element. There you go. So basically, it is taking the old augment system and making it more obvious to use, okay? It's just taking the old mechanic that was already there and making it in a more user-friendly way. So as far as these, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the armors thing, we're getting to that. There was a question over the elements. I answered this twice already, but the elements feel roughly equivalent to about 2.5 ranks of a previous augment. This does seem to start off at the start of the equation rather than the end of it, as far as I can tell. So potentially it might be able to scale a little, you know, to scale reasonably well. But basically, you just get a slight boost. We're looking at like 5-10%-ish. You're not going to be specifically picking out different elements, but in niche situations, it might be just what you're looking for. Okay, now we get to the armor thing, because this is the screen that I wanted to get to. Everyone's got twice as much armor than before. Technically, they've got 4 times more health, but the health doesn't matter, because all the damage has been scaled up to match the health. What matters is the armor, okay? So when you're not getting past armor, essentially you are taking drastic penalties to any of your attacks here. And yes, this can scale all the way down to 1, just like it did in the PSP version. But basically, the way that it's redone now, it's giving you a better idea of when you're moving in the right direction. So for example, if this lady right here were to stick with her short bow, she suddenly might find herself in a very drastically shitty situation as soon as the next fight starts, as compared to the lady with the longbow here, because essentially the longbow is packing a few extra points of penetration here. You may actually notice that the short bow is actually buffed from its PSP version, whereas, for example, the great bow is a little bit lower. But still, overall, you're going to be seeing a lot more penetration off longbows than you will be short bows. But there is a actual reason to do the old parry build in this one. So this is something that they technically could do before, but it was very unclear. So any folks that were through this game a million times would essentially start the game off by leveling their characters to unreasonably high levels, picking up parry, training it on low tier weapons, using those higher base stats to keep the short bow going, and it would be a fun build to play around with. Personally, I liked using that on something like Warriors. Why would you bother doing this though? Well, it's basically a skirmisher build. Basically, this is like a kind of adaptable counter build that's able to kind of effectively deal with multiple ranges at once. They don't do as much damage as a dedicated damage dealer, but the general idea is more that you have somebody that can, for example, like let's say somebody needs to be shanked at close range, or in this case, you want to have the pretty solid scaling dagger finisher available at close range, but you still wanted to have the longer range finishers, or you wanted to be able to harass, like let's say a healer or something, off from the sides. Okay, so this would basically, the point of the build would just be adaptability. So in the original version, the answer was grind. In this version, it's basically like, okay, so I can go to the store, I can go and pick up some stuff here, and as we can see, there's a lot more armor pieces, twice as many armor pieces, meaning that you can essentially stack your stats for offensive units or defensive units or whatever else. You can build them out for the kind of customization, kind of the armor customization that you want here. Now you've got 3 options in Chapter 1. You basically got your leathers, your chains, and your mage versions to tweak with as you will. Obviously, again, limited to Chapter 1, but you can do some fun stuff with this regardless. This is something that, if you remember the PSP version, stuff expanded, past Chapter 1. I cannot be more clear about this. I've seen a decent number of assumptions, just kind of assuming it's sort of stopped there for some reason. But still, as you can kind of generally see that, that's kind of what you'd be going for. So, like, for example, with Sarah, if we wanted to maybe do a little bit more with her, we can see that giving her 3 dexterity as opposed to that 1 strength would end up improving her ranged attack by a decent chunk. Interesting thing in this one, by the way, though, is that strength seems far more heavily weighted as your kind of primary offensive stat. Again, I want to be very clear that this does not mean that it is the only thing in all situations. But 2 factors here. 1, the stat screen actually does seem to do a better job of explaining your overall kind of attack situation. And B, you get a better general idea of just kind of what stats will end up being helpful here. Anyway, so as far as strength goes, when I was testing 2 units, for example, with different career paths, training them as a berserker and training the other as an archer, generally speaking, they still wound up within 1 or 2 points of each other because the archer was still training up strength. You still get more or less universal stat growths whenever somebody levels up. You might go a few points here or there in a particular direction, but you won't necessarily miss out by having somebody as the wrong class, for example. You might have a few points that end up going to the wrong place here or there, but please bear in mind that the whole level cap thing kind of ends up helping if that's the sort of individual that you are, because essentially you have a point where it just suddenly stops, and then you can't take any more, quote-unquote wrong levels there. Anyway, so as far as things go, as far as penetration is concerned, it's really going to be the bigger factor. Like I will say, I feel like the actual armor breakthroughs, especially in Chapter 1 here, are going to be more significant in this than maybe the PSP version. Does that mean that it is the only thing? No. Okay, I cannot possibly stress enough that the game is, as it always has been, a very it depends type situation. So, for example, like let's say you have an attack there and you have a few different options. You can have your dude go in for a big hit, but the big hit would only do like 90% of their, like let's say it'll get them down to 10% health, right? Now, is that necessarily going to be more helpful than, let's say, if you get Paralytic Wave and it'll just waste their next turn entirely? What is the purpose of your attack? Is it to make sure that unit is not there? Is it to prevent some damage that they were going to do? Is it, what's the actual purpose of your move? So, like, in many cases, if you're going for eliminating multiple units, you might go for a Poison Cloud instead. It won't do anything right now, it won't disable them right now, but it will make sure that a good chunk of their health is gone for later. Maybe you just need a unit gone for now. Okay, great, you've got Sleep right here. Maybe you want to make sure that there's a unit that's going to go and take out somebody that you can't reach. Then you would go for something like Charm. And then, if you wanted multiple units to potentially waste their turns, just cause a little bit of a slowdown in the enemy team at large, then you would go for a Paralytic Wave. But here's the thing. When it comes to some of your other builds, like I was mentioning that Skirmisher thing earlier, why is that even a concept? Well, there's certain cases, and like I will say my personal favorite one was, at least in the early game, was essentially to take a knight and just give them a crossbow, right? Why? Why would you bother doing this? Well, they might not necessarily do a lot with that crossbow, but at the same time, they've got decent strength, they're still going to do okay, they're still going to do some damage to something, and they're pretty bulky, meaning that you can essentially just move them into position and just have them block the way. They're very tanky, and generally speaking, their main purpose is there as a wall. And a wall, that happens to be able to shoot back without having to get out of position is pretty useful in my opinion. So you got stuff like that. Or for example, like let's say in Chapter 1 here, those 2 points of vitality off a hand axe might basically mean the difference between them taking mild damage to absolutely negligible damage. Whereas for example, they might potentially do a little bit more damage output out of a sword. But they might have an easier time dealing with armor when it comes to the hammer. So your choices are not just numbers. Your choices will be very situational, and most of the time folks will essentially just kind of feel out what it is that they really want to be achieving. So again, do not try to find the meta here. This is not an MMO. In general, I have to say, because of like for example, you may notice, and I apologize that this is going to be a roundabout way of saying this, but as we are in Chapter 1, you may notice that I do not have the option to suddenly mass level everybody to max level, get their base stats and ranks and whatever else maxed out, in order to, push through the game. If you remember one of the early interviews for Reborn, Matsuno was basically saying, hey, in this version, you're not going to be able to, play through the game as if you're Superman or something along those lines. And you're not going to be able to just power through the entire thing using just grinding. Take that message as you will. You know how in the latest trailer, they showed a guy that was going above max level? Something to think about. Anyway, so moving on here. As far as general concepts go, it should be noted that the shield bash is definitely going to be more of a thing this time around. As we can see in the very intro here, just shield bashes are going to be doing comparable damage to pretty much everybody else. But with all of this being said, so what I want to do here is basically do a sort of minimum level Nibith kind of deal here, okay? Because I want to see what we can potentially do out of this situation. I haven't really tried this yet, but it feels like a fun thing to experiment around with. Anyway, we don't really see a whole lot in the way of skills yet for Vice, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of build him out for a kind of a raw DPS type situation. We can give him some different skills, but we can't actually change his class or anything. Which would potentially be useful here, but, whatever. Having him as a Berserker might be pretty handy. Either way, we don't have Berserk on our Berserker yet, so that's going to come as it will. Again, we're just going to go minimum level on this. We can do Tremendous here. We can go ahead and put Daggers on here just for the hell of it. I will say, as far as the values on these skills go, I forget if I mentioned this earlier, if I cut that part out, but it feels like these skills are kind of a combination of all of the previous stackables just put into one, as well as the accuracy skills, because I can't help but notice that as they're going up, like let's say in Chapter 1 you can get it up to rank 11, okay? These weapon skills are capped in the same way that your level is capped. If I see another person complaining about the fact that you can't get every finisher right off the bat, it's gonna lose my dang mind. But no, it is not a it is not a newbie mechanic. There is logic behind it. We're going to leave it there. Again, do you remember the level 1 run? Yeah, picking up Death Whale, like, before even leaving the intro, and never using anything but Death Whale throughout the entire game? I have no idea how Death Whale works in this one, but, or if it even is there, but what I will say, because, again, wouldn't be a Chapter 1 thing, so I couldn't cover it anyway, but I will say that, you know, it's very nice to actually have to think about the game, is the thing. Alright, so, what else here? So yeah, these skills seem to be a combination of, like, for example, your anatomy, your weapon rank, your augment, all combined into one, as well as, I believe, the True Strike and True Flight skills, as well as not quite Spell Strike, because Spell Strike is its own thing. So Spell Strike, it comes with concentration, as well as the item buff, which actually we should probably pick that up as well. So what I want to do, it's like right off the bat, we're going to have a few issues when it comes to taking on Nibeth this early. Namely the fact that we are going to have a hard time dealing with his just raw DPS here. So we're going to want a few things. For one thing, we're going to want resilience on people, because he's a spell type of dude, so we're going to want that. Let's see, we're going to want to have sidestep in some cases as well. Additionally, let's see, probably spoil spell, maybe not on spoil spell. Let's get a couple, probably a couple heal crafts. So as you might have noticed earlier in the video, and I already mentioned this, but these buffs, the item buffs, they do actually last the entire round. So let's pick up a couple of those. Let's see. Yeah, I think we will actually go for spoil spell in case we can get anybody nearby him, particularly Canopus. Next up, we're going to want some Fairy Scale for the healers to make their healing better. We're going to want Spellcraft on our caster. We're going to want some plumes. We already have those. And additionally, we're going to want some Mend +1s just in case our healers can't quite get to it in time. Alright, so let's go ahead and load everybody up here. So Mr. Denim here is going to be our primary tank and likely going to be the dude that is going to be charging in and going all the way to the back. We're going to replace his Area Ion with Blessing Stone. So, something I want to point out is that when it comes to the value of buffs and different things, is when we were talking about that armor thing earlier, like, I can't stress enough that strengthen and just general damage boosting stuff doesn't have as much / almost any effect if it's not getting past armor. Alright? So this basically means that if you have a strengthen on you, and you are completely bouncing off armor, you will continue bouncing off armor. It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you're punching a battleship, you're punching a battleship. You're just going to hurt your hand. But you get the general idea. Like, if you can't penetrate, what are you doing? So again, stats are the first layer of penetration, but your gear kind of has its own kind of section there as well. Now, what I'm thinking with his loadout right here is that he's going to be... he just has one heal to kind of keep himself going on the way up. If he's got any allies that go down, he gets a Blessing Stone. I don't realistically expect him to be taking the brunt of the damage, but whatever. This is to increase damage against Nibeth if he can get close to him. And then an Exorcism for anything along the way. Although, realistically, I'm thinking maybe... yeah, maybe we just give him Resilience here instead. So, there we go. We're going to put that on there. Let's see. For you, I think we're just going to go ahead and... let's kind of stack him up on heals here, just to give him more to do, as well as an Exorcism, as well as one more just basic leaf, so we're not wasting too much money on that. I'm going to pick up one more Spirit Surge and one more Exorcism. You are going to get Spirit Surge, just to give you a more offensive option. So we'll load up right there. We'll actually go ahead and pick up some MP leaves for her as well, so that she's all nice and loaded. Oh, interesting. You actually don't have MP leaves at the very start, but you do get the Mend +1 immediately. Alright, whatever. Fair enough. We can make that work. So, actually, she's got Meditate. She'll be fine on MP. Seraph Pact. Well, I mean, not like there's any point to Seraph Pact. At least not this early. Alright, let's see. Berserker-wise, you are just going to want to go for big damage. You're going to want Resilience, because that thing is going to shred you. One heal while you get ready for being resilient. And probably one more sidestep, because you'll almost inevitably get targeted by archers. Next up on our parry archer here, we're going to want a strengthen on you, even though you'll probably not get past any armor whatsoever. Resilience. Wait a minute. Wait, no. wrong thing, wrong thing. Okay, so let's see. For our spellcaster, we're going to do that. We're going to do spellcraft. There we go. Spellcraft on you. We're going to do... What do I want to do on you? Probably one more just recovery thing, one more emergency heal there. Actually, for Canopus, we're going to do another big heal on him. He's probably going to be the one to get close, so we'll do a spoil spell on him. We'll go ahead and do a resilience, because he's probably going to get hit as well as a sidestep. Just basically, you can have... I believe the rules are probably going to be the same, where you can have one defensive buff active and one evasive buff active. So I'll put that on there. Donalto's lines are pretty funny, so we're going to bring him on for this one. Again, resilience and sidestep for you. Healcraft for you. As well as... I guess you really don't need much else, do you? Alright, well, anyway, let's go see who we can actually bring into this fight. Quick cut. Alright, so we're actually going to swap the two healers out for shields here, just to give them a little bit more hard defense. Realistically, let's go ahead and take... probably this Def Ring off you, so that we can go ahead and give it to our Cleric here. Technically, we probably should be going with Voltaire and Sarah, but I'm going to stick with the generics here. Or the standard generics, as you were. So for the Enchantress here, we're actually going to go Knife and Shield. Reason for this is a chance to parry. Technically speaking, it, you know, if we waited for this fight for later, I think a dagger and a light staff is probably my favorite. Like, just doing the old Gandalf thing for casters is probably my favorite thing there. Let's see, for Gwyneth, I mean, you're fine with spears, to be honest. I probably could go shield, sword and shield on her. Nah, but counter's gonna be pretty handy in this particular situation. Alright, so we're gonna leave that as is. In his case, we're actually swapping out this, do we want to leave the axe? I mean, 2 Vit is pretty significant early on, so we're gonna leave that. Alright, so final kind of loadout I've gone on people here. So, yeah, pretty much just buffs on Donalto. We'll give him one basic, actually probably one revive, just in case. We've got 1 heal and all buffs on Canopus. I've got 2 strengthen buffs on the Valk here. 1 exorcism, you know, just in case no one else is available, as well as a blessing stone. Spear for slightly longer range. We've got the Cleric with just a shield here, with a heal and exorcism, as well as awaken, but realistically that's probably not something we're going to run into here. Healcraft and sidestep there as well. We've got spellcraft and sidestep on you. Didn't I pick up one for... I didn't pick up spell strike, did I? Well, oh well. Ideally would have been spell strike and poison, but whatever. We will make that work. She should have... Yes, she does have concentration at least, so that'll do the job there. By the way, to answer the one question about the person asking if this is... Okay. As far as concentration goes, alright, it's interesting that it's here. We'll, like, as far as cross-classing goes, we'll leave it at that. And, yes, it is called, concentration. Wonder where I've heard that in the PSP version. Moving on. Okay, so as far as our kind of defensive caster sword here, we're not going to go for a longbow just because it's funnier not to. I don't expect her to do too much, but, you know, she's going for resilience. That's probably going to help her out there. She has bow skill. It's probably going to go up to 5 relatively quick here, so I'd assume she probably will hopefully not get targeted as much. You know, just due to having slightly higher armor versus bows, but whatever, we'll leave that as is. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this thing. Now, for the first question, as far as whether or not the cards are going to be like the big end-all be-all. I think I hopefully covered this well enough last time, but yeah, no, cards are definitely not going to be the end-all be-all kind of situation. They're really just another thing to think about. Basically, like everything else, it's basically just been another momentum mechanic this whole time. Like, as you'd kind of expect. This game has always had a lot of kind of momentum mechanics. Sometimes it's been more subtle than others, like for example, back in the original version, you could just keep summoning the same element over and over until your prevailing element was absolutely insane. So you could essentially boost a whole bunch of units that way. I mean, granted, at that point, you could also turn people into immortal turbo zombies. So there was just a lot that was cheesable in that particular system. But when it comes to momentum mechanics in PSP, I mean, you basically had a lot of similar type stuff. Units would drop cards; they would improve their stats very slightly, but that wouldn't exactly make a big difference in the here and now. So these cards are basically spawning in to give you potentially an interesting place to move. Like maybe you want to, maybe you need a little boost here or there. And it does. Again, it's one of those mini mechanics that I've seen come up in comments very regularly. And, like, the main point that I just gotta get across here is just don't judge a thing before you've tried it. I've seen so many folks saying that they're gonna try and mod it out on day one and all that kind of thing. Like, you don't understand how deep it goes. I can't cover more. You don't understand how deep it goes. it's really good, actually. But okay. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get a couple of those buffed up and moved over there. Alright, you're going to get your meditate, you're going to get all charged up. We're just going to go ahead and put a thingamajig on you, so hopefully you don't get sniped if you were to move over here. Because we're going to want to follow Vice so that his general attack and everything else isn't wasted here. I'm going to start off with a resilience on you as well. Main reason, because, yeah, we're pretty much expecting to get absolutely bombarded here. But alright, so she'll do that. Yeah, you're gonna start off with yourself, and then you're gonna go for probably Canopus on the second one. Like, Denim should probably be perfectly fine on his own here. But anyways, yeah, what we ideally want to have happen here is that their archers will hopefully only target specific people that can kind of take their hits better. Like, the way that armor goes in this one. Like, you might be looking at that and thinking, oh, they're only doing, whatever percentage thing. But look how many things you can potentially combine, okay? Look just how many mechanics there are flying around. Like, the fact that, sure, you can, like, you 100% can just have those situations where, a unit is taking less damage than before. At the same time, like, they're taking an attack, a counter, a pincer, and taking a knockback, as well as an instill, as well as, whatever the hell else happens to be going on at the same time. Like, dude, there's so much more that you can do. Like, right there, it doesn't even matter what the attack was. I was actually attacking with Vice there, not with Denim. So those are those situations that I'm talking about. Like, there's just a lot to this system. And there's a lot to play around with, and if you play well, again, I'm still talking about Chapter 1 here, but if you play well, you're gonna have some stuff. So it's just, it's just fun to play around with. Don't look at one mechanic by itself. I cannot possibly stress that enough. Nothing like, just like the PSP version, no mechanic is its own island. No mechanic is off by itself. Everything interacts. It's all a piece of a puzzle. It's all, just all over the place, really. Everything is just another thing to interact with. Everything is just another move to make, another combination to combine. When they were saying in all the advertisements and whatever else that just like all of this is going to be adding all kinds of new fun stuff to play around with, and just all kinds of new things to potentially combine and whatever else. Yeah, that wasn't false advertising. But again, I'm talking about Chapter 1 right now, so we're just talking about Chapter 1, so if we were to go farther than Chapter 1, well, that would be a thing for another time. But, you get what I'm getting at here. Like, you can see already the implications of what can be. So, anyway. Just don't judge before you know. Like, you cannot judge what you have not yet tried. Also, it's still a little bit funny to me. I have to say, one of those, like, weird historical things that always kind of struck me as odd is the Zeiston. Because, like, for anyone that didn't know, a Zeiston is not, like, it doesn't really make sense right here. It never really has. But basically, it was just called the Slim Spear or something like that in the SNES version. But I think it's just like the Geese Arm and the Poleaxe and whatever else, where they just kind of picked a thing that sounded cool. Because, yeah, so a Zeiston was a very oddly specific, like, Greek double spear. Like, the whole, apparently it was like I guess it was like Alexander the Great's favorite thing or something like that. So it's another one of those, it's just like, it's a cool historical nod, and it sounds cool, but realistically, it's got nothing to do with the current situation or the current weapon. Oh man, that's some nice good damage there. Anyway, so yeah, point being that yeah, it's not a double spear. It would be kind of neat if it was, but whatever. So we're just gonna take a basic hit here to set up. I believe I had pincer on him, didn't I? Yeah, I did. So like that's what I mean. Like you can attack with multiple units at once. If you we'll just go ahead and call it a Ogre Battle 64 reference, because you know what, you can never have too many of those. But yeah, like just the fact that you can be attacking with so many more units at once, the fact that poison scales. How much does health matter when it's just melting right off with poison, you know? And no, that does not mean that health is... I feel like this has kind of come up with pretty much every little thing that I've mentioned. It's like, you'll mention one thing is a particular way, and then immediately there's like 4 or 5 comments of like, oh no, this means that this one thing is broken. Like, dude, big picture, stop staring at the details. You're missing it. You're completely, like, not even missing the forest through the trees. You're missing the forest, like, staring at a stick on the ground and just declaring that's your new car. So, anyway, it goes deeper. As always with the series, it goes deeper. So, there we go. But yeah, so I kind of got a bit away off the topic here as far as basic, basic mechanics and stuff are concerned. Alright, so... we should probably get to those basic mechanics, huh? So, as far as what we're doing here, basically what we're doing is we are trying to create a situation where, like in this particular case, like all we really have to do in this fight, and really what this game all boils down to is big picture stuff. Technically speaking, the only objective in this fight is this guy to not breathe anymore. So, how do we do that? Well, technically we could go ahead and charge the guy, but even if we look at her strongest attack right here, well, that's not going to be doing very much, is it? So we need to find some way to take our currently existing situation, and no, this does not mean the daggers are worthless. This whole situation means that she is specifically here as an example of the fact that a skirmisher can still be useful. So, for example, she might just hang around the front, use her low defense and chance to parry to effectively eat hits, because if you can cause a unit to eat hits and just heal that one unit instead of healing, like, let's say 3 different units, that have been scattered about to the wind, it means you can get more healthy units past their front line to their back line. So in this particular case, she just has to sit here, and sit here is a tempting target. She has a chance to go ahead and eat away hits, and yeah, technically all she was really doing there was putting him into just low enough health that poison would have been able to finish him off. But, okay, I guess that didn't really need to necessarily happen, so we'll just go ahead and heal up from that attack there. Move her back to hopefully kind of keep her back out of the front row, because we want our skirmisher to be the one taking hits. But okay. So, big picture situation here is we need to get these guys out of the way. We've already established that with what we've got on the field right now, even though we've lost 1 unit, we've taken out 2 of theirs, and we can pretty safely, slowly push our way up. We're not being overly threatened at a long distance, because we know that this guy, looking at him right here, he's probably going to be a fairly threatening caster right here. We've picked up buffs beforehand. I mean, granted, you wouldn't always know this ahead of time, but it's always good to have a selection of buffs on hand, and you can always scout the map beforehand to get a general kind of like visual idea of what you're looking at. I mean, this dude looks like a scary wizard guy, so he's probably going to hit us pretty hard with that, but there's a wall in the way, so what we're trying to do essentially is make use of the fact that we don't have he doesn't have line of sight on us very clearly right here. Take out a few of his units before the fight really starts, kind of sneak our dude around here, and he's got 1 heal to kind of eat a hit along the way, but he is going to try and disable this guy's casting abilities, whereas everybody else is going to try and grind down their front line. Once his casting abilities have been weakened, then we'll go ahead and move forward. We can more safely risk that. We've brought extra healing along to be able to better withstand the attacks that are coming in, and additionally, we've come in with a few defensive options, specifically a lot of parry builds, to hopefully mostly mitigate some of their scarier damage that's kind of coming along the way. Alright, so at this point, let's see, ideally should be there to exercise that one guy, but we can go ahead and move right here to keep the healers protected. Generally speaking, you want to try to keep your lines as solid as possible, that while archers on their initial hits aren't necessarily the scariest thing in the world, they are something that's very good at exploiting weaknesses. So, what we're going to do here is make use of our pincers. Just go ahead and take an attack on the front, take our pincer to get those double attacks going, and we're going to go ahead and move him up just a little bit. So to about right here, that should be perfectly fine, because we've already used up the pincer that we're going to use. Now, for the time being, We're going to go ahead and use him to support against these ghosts, because he's, like, Canopus comes in with higher stats than everybody else. So, we can go ahead and do that. Now, ideally, what we'd be doing is actually waiting for this guy to take his move until he doesn't have to attack that round. But I'm fairly confident that he can take at least one hit while everybody else is distracted up front, so we're just going to go ahead and leave that situation as it is. Now, let's see. Our axe won't quite do it, our shield won't quite do it, but we can't quite finish off this guy, but she can go ahead and get herself buffed up a little bit. She's a very physically orientated class, so we'll go ahead and buff her up and kind of move her up here. Move her up one tile so that they reset up that pincer. Now, am I now overvaluing pincers? I mean, again, it all depends. That's kind of the thing. Every single mechanic will cause somebody to think that particular mechanic is overpowered. It's honestly quite interesting, the mental situation that happens there. But anyway, so we see the skirmisher's doing a pretty good job of avoiding, deflecting, and whatever else different damage. So we'll just continue leaving her over there. And as we see, that previously that particular attack probably would have done around 250 to her, and it instead did about 170. So that's good and useful. Now, will anything happen from her trying to shank this guy? Probably just some extra damage that we don't necessarily need to be taking. So we'll go ahead and move her over here and see if she can harass this ghost a little bit. And she can. As you can see, this standard nobody archer here is still doing just fine, even compared to Canopus, who has far higher stats. Because, again, all damage situations in this game will just entirely depend. So, really, there are no hard and fast rules. It's just kind of stuff that you generally feel out. And a lot of the times, you'll be feeling stuff out on the fly. Alright, we're going to go for this here, hoping that maybe... Yeah, there we go. I was hoping for the knockback, but I saw that she picked up a crit card at some point, so there was a chance for that to happen. Now, she's going to go ahead and move her way on up, and wants to take an exorcism. We probably want to take this one instead. Just because their countdown is a little bit more ahead. And we'll go ahead and continue moving on this way. So we'll go ahead and form up in a kind of block formation here. On no particular reason other than just kind of pushing our way through the front. I can't help but notice, I don't know how, but in some particular situation I actually did find a way that when I had a unit next to another unit, like there was a unit that had Rampart Aura, and when I walked a unit past that Rampart Aura, I believe having a friendly in the Rampart Aura area actually managed to break the Rampart Aura. As in, I believe there might potentially be a push-through mechanic there. I'm not certain by any means, but it does seem to potentially, possibly be a thing. Anyway, so at this point, he's gone ahead and he's pushed himself forward a little bit here. Now, since armor doesn't quite work like it did before, spellcasters are actually a decent bit more threatening to, for example, high armor units this time around. So, for example, a knight, even though they've got very high vitality and whatever else, if their resistance is low, they would still be having a hard time here. But because of the fact that Denim is so defensively stacked compared to everybody else, he's generally not going to draw as much attention to himself. Like, usually you'll notice this when it comes to certain types of units, that if you have somebody that is extraordinarily more defensive than everybody else, then they might potentially run into that situation where they're just not attempting a treat anymore. Anyway, so yeah, he's not going to be doing very much to Nibeth here, but oh well. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot at this guy. Hopefully he doesn't knock back. There we go. Because what we want to do at this point is actually... oh, darn, I was really hoping he'd be able to take a step forward. It's fine, whatever. We're just going to take a heal with him as well. If we can hopefully get a shield bash onto that skeleton, they can actually follow up with a good hit there as well. But for now, we're just going to have her take some basic attacks and leave it at that. So, again, basic archer's still doing pretty solid damage to a better unit over there. Okay, looks like that bash is out of the window. That's perfectly fine. These things will happen. Again, you don't really get no plans will ever go completely perfectly. I want to point out that this has always been, like, even with the PSP version, whatever else, this has always been the case. Like, the whole point, and a lot of the messaging behind the game, a lot of the everything else, it really oftentimes comes down to just stuff doesn't go according to plan. What are you going to do about it? right? It's like, there's a lot of just situations where, yeah, you know, things will go wrong. Things will absolutely not go according to the plan. How will you adapt? Like, it's never been the FFT thing of, like... And again, I don't want to say FFT negatively. You know, that game's a gem in its own right. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of assumptions, like, you just do the damage and that's the only thing you do. Because this isn't checkers, this is chess. Sometimes you move all your pawns across the board just to lock somebody else in place. So that's kind of the way to think about it here. Like right here, technically speaking, the first and most obvious answer would be, you know, do I just go and, you know, go and attempt to revive that unit that's downed over there? But why necessarily do I want to do that when at the same time I can go over here and I can prevent his movement, you know, block him off from this direction. Now suddenly he has to be closer to our other units. Whether that unit is up or down doesn't really matter, because we can potentially end it before that ever becomes a factor. So, like right here, sure, if we wanted to go and revive them, this guy, for example, does not have the time to do an exorcism, but we can go ahead and make that happen. Sure, why not? So she's not going to get up immediately, but she will get up the following round. So we can just move her up here, probably just have her take a little bit of a heal, and maybe set her up for another attack. But the kind of thought process here is to always have backup plans. Okay? Because things will change. Things can change. Things absolutely do change. And so in this particular case, we see that, okay, he is, like, we're now in a situation where we suddenly have units that are on the back there, but it's fine because we have a very defensive unit that's blocking them. We don't know what kind of units they are yet, but taking a look, let's say we got a melee guy, that's fine. We got a archer, that's whatever. And we got another archer. Okay, so they've suddenly got 2 more archers off in the backfield. That's whatever. It's something we'll have to deal with if we have to deal with it. Now, do we have an exorcism on you? Yes, we do. Okay, so in this case, we might as well just take that little bit of extra bonus damage if it'll do anything good for us. And we'll go ahead and exorcise this guy. Now, she's not much of a magic-y sort, so she's going to go ahead and fail to use that thing properly. That's fine, these things will happen. It's rare that they happen, but they will happen. But we just play around that, that's why we have backup plans. So, in this particular case, let's see. We are going to go ahead and put Spellcraft on her, just as a potential backup option, because there's not really anything else that I really want to do with her. And we have a backup Exorcism right there, so we're still perfectly fine. So this may be a weird roundabout way to get to the point, but when it comes to those higher health bars, those are not the main factor. The reason that the armor is the factor of the higher health bars and why this is good is it essentially allows for more of what is effectively the core experience of this game and always has been, which is effectively just turning stuff around. Those big turnarounds, those big kind of momentum changes, and they've always been a thing. Again, back since the SNES, back since Ogre Battle even, back in in the original game that started all these things, it was always a thing. Like those moments where you would have a bunch of cards that you picked up, and it would suddenly be like, okay, great, I have this one nobody team that's over here. I can't really do very much with them. Like, what am I potentially? Does he have a? Okay, I don't think he has a pincer. Oh well. So like I've got this one team out of nowhere, I've got a bunch of cards that I've saved up from, here. These 3 other guys over here took towns in order to get cards, in order for this completely outclassed team to suddenly have a chance over in this other direction. And so it's like these interesting on-the-fly changes that end up completely changing the overall momentum of the fight. Now, am I saying that's what these cards are here for? No, but what I am saying is that, you always want a backup plan. So in this particular case, we've already, we may be out-leveled, we may be out-geared, we may be outnumbered, but it doesn't really matter, because we've essentially played to the strengths of this team here. We've locked down units that we don't need to be dealing with right now, and we've slowly been churning our way forward here. Like this unit right here, this archer, technically has absolutely terrible damage output, but we've gone ahead and taken some extra numbers on her in order to help boost her up a little bit. Right here, we have a Nibeth that's effectively been disabled, more or less, due to a buff that we threw on him, so hopefully that won't let him down as many units. Does that mean that we're going to get no incapacitations and that's the only way to play this game? Hell no. It never has been. It's funny that for some reason so many folks want to immediately go for no incapacitations as their first run. Why? Why would you do that to yourself? Anyway, so we'll just go ahead and see if we can maybe throw some more poison over that way and just deal with them a little bit. Yeah, slowly but surely, we take a couple tiles at a time. We do take our movements quickly. We lock units down that we don't want to be dealing with. And we just kind of slink our way forward. And there we go. Like that's the mentality here. It's more a machine than individual units. The individual people are individual people. If they need to be sacrificed, they need to be sacrificed. But you know, we'll make it work one way or another. Right here, for example, we want a pincer. Actually, wait, he's not going to turn around, so that's not going to pincer. I should have gone the other way. Oh, whatever. Anyway, that would trigger a pincer if he was facing the other way. They have to be standing behind them. That would have been a cool moment. Oh well. Still, we'll be able to set that up again, I'm sure. Alright, oh, and by the way, there was a question over whether you can do the whole double spear thing plus a pincer. I mean, that's... The second part of that is not Chapter 1 material. But I will say that, you know, 2 spears still counter on the opposite end of a dude, so, you know. Any dang ways. So, let's see. Let's see if one more heal will maybe keep them in the fight for one round or longer. Sure. Let's go throw that out there. Why not? Leave him in place so that he's not wasting any turns. That might be... Yeah, that's Valk heavily damaged, but that's fine. Now if we go over here, she might potentially be able to use her sort of... Yeah, we're still not really penetrating his defenses, but that's fine. Whatever, she can do something against that guy. Like, that's what I mean. Everybody's got their role. Everybody's got their role to play. So, you go here, and then if anybody were to attack him from the front, like right here, that should pincer him for the finish. And there we go. That is this part done at the minimum possible level. So, yeah. Technically speaking, funnily, as weird as it sounds, I would say the second hardest fight, actually, in Chapter 1. I think you might be very surprised at the difficulty in play. Like, again, there's a lot of assumptions that I see flying around over how much things will work like they used to before, and how much they don't, and all of that kind of thing. Don't assume what you haven't tried yet. That's what I cannot stress enough. Don't assume on something you haven't tried yet, but yeah, it feels absolutely fantastic. As you can see, like, I have not needed to go and, you know, go through 20 different friggin' menus to go equip everybody for a bunch of stuff that they can just do now. So it's clearly been very elegantly designed here. Oh, by the way, the other question that somebody was asking, I apologize, by the way, if I sound a little raspy. It's gotten really cold all of a sudden. So that's been a little bit of a thing. Anyway, there was a question over the debuffs, over kind of what's changed where. So as you can see, the debuffs are just on one list for Chapter 1 at this point, which has generally just been a solid quality of life thing. Like, for example, sure, technically in the original it was like, oh, you go for Balmy Breeze or you go for the Dark version. But let's be very clear, what that boiled down to is you use Dark if it's what you're using, and if you want Balmy Breeze, you go down Air. Which is all well and good, but Balmy Breeze was freaking busted. Let's not even kid ourselves there. AoE sleep with like 80% accuracy right off the bat. Yeah, that thing absolutely, like, the friggin' suboptimal run of just basically using nothing but random crap we found lying along the floor through most of the game. Yeah, that Balmy Breeze basically carried that, and that's something that you just got right off the bat. So I think we can live with single target sleep being the first thing you get in the shop. It's fine. We can live with that. Not to mention, the actual basic sleep seems a decent bit cheaper, especially considering the fact that Meditate is functionally the equivalent of a, you know, high rank Meditate right off the bat. As you saw, they get access to like 12 MP or so extra per round. So more or less, they should, like, with Meditate on most rounds, they should just be like, they should be able to do sleep and stuff like that just fine. Same thing for Poison Cloud. Again, for Chapter 1, I have rarely run into situations where Poison Cloud wasn't just available right off the bat. Actually, one little note on Paralytic Wave, by the way. Paralysis works a little bit differently from before, because you might notice a lot more characters are just kind of running around with counterattack these days. So you may notice that Stun does not actually block counter anymore. In fact, it feels like stumble odds are roughly or maybe slightly higher. If I was going to say roughly the same or slightly higher. But I will say, like, it has been changed to where, yeah, it does not block counter. That was a weird quirk that it had before, where basically in the PSP version, if you stunned somebody, they would have no means of a counterattack. It just completely shut off the ability, so yeah. Just something to bear in mind, that if you were looking for something that utterly busted, it doesn't quite do that anymore. But that, honestly, I wasn't sure about that at first because I loved abusing that in the PSP version. But it's kind of grown on me. Like, generally speaking, it's nice to see so many anti-frustration features. Like, for example, the fact that that somebody cannot like turbo grind their way through, through chapter 1, spend their like first 20 hours of a run just mass grinding Tynemouth Hill and stuff like that. It sounds like a option nerf, but it's really more of an anti-frustration feature. As in, again, you play the game now. It stops you at a sane point, and then moves on, right? Again, we're talking about chapter 1 right now. So, like at this point, it would, sure, technically we can get our level slightly higher, but it's still like it's stopping you at a sane point. It's like, okay, hold on, chill out. You got a few options, you got a new, couple new skills and whatever to play around with throughout your party. Everyone's already cross-classed for you, so if you can cross-class a skill, it's just already there now. There's one exception, actually, and that would be the recruit skills. Which, yeah, honestly, again, I liked having a recruit skill on everybody before, but, feels good to me. Anyway, so, let's go ahead and move on here. Okay, we've gotten really far away from that whole basic concepts thing. Because originally I was thinking, like, I wanted to cover something along the lines of, like, oh, here's how you shield bash into other dudes, or here's how the kind of, like, 6-tile shot works, where you have two tiles of 3 right next to each other, and you're always guaranteed a good diagonal shot from the, like, for example, I call it the 6-tile because it's, like, for example, it's, like, 1, 1, 2, 3, and then, like, if you're right here, you do the knight move from chess, then you're always guaranteed to have a good diagonal, unless there's an obstacle in the way. Like, that was always one of those things I really appreciated, but I always just kind of internalized it in the background, so I completely forgot. Anyway, so here's the big difference, by the way, that armor makes. Like, pretty much immediately you start noticing that some skirmisher builds will drop off. Just so you know, even through the end of Chapter 1, this does improve. This is because her skills are very low. This is the lowest possible that she can be without skipping the Nibeth fight, or Nibeth, again. So for example, she can penetrate his armor, so she's doing more than double the damage to him, but it's basically bouncing off of her. So typically speaking, the way it can be seen is that most basic, reasonably effective attacks are going to be doing about 25%-ish damage. But most ineffective attacks are going to be doing drastically less. And again, this can scale all the way down to 1, depending on the circumstances. Magic in general is very solid for handling that in a kind of initial situation, where it's going to be pretty reasonably effective against most things, though generally that ratio goes down to about 20% damage per each of their attacks. Again, this is going to vary depending on a wide variety of different situations. And now, just to show this real quick as far as how the AI can function, we're going to do this. So he is going to be an attacker, and then as each of these come up, we're going to go ahead and switch them into their roles. Again, the actual overall drama of this little revelation here feels like it's kind of been sidetracked a little bit by the fact that I've been rambling endlessly about a million different things, but whatever. You know, you do what you can. You do what you can. So, alright, so those are going to be switching to Mender. As you can see, they will go ahead and not be attacking. Now, why did I switch the clerics in all my videos to the attacker phase? Well, because there's one little quirk of the fact that you can't really scale up your healing with your cudgel skill anymore. I say anymore. It was a very minor thing before, okay? So before, when you would have, like, Auglight, and you would have, like, you can actually scale it up still with your elemental affinity. But, like, let's say you had your Auglight, you had your anatomy, and all of that, and then you stacked a prevailing element by using, like, something like Spirit Surge over and over and over and over and over. Technically, you could with Heal too, except it was, like, let's say if you're trying to get to a score of 400 or so, it was going at about 0.2 per each time you used it, so have fun with that. Anyway, a million esoteric background mechanics aside, we're talking about a situation where, at most, they would get, like, 20 extra healing off their heals. Like, this would scale up per rank, but generally speaking, you're somewhere in that ballpark. And again, before, all you would really need to do to match that at any point was use Healcraft. It would just automatically max it out. It wouldn't combine, like, you couldn't stack the two things, which is why I say that this time it feels like there's finally a reason to use the Fairy Scale Tower. because back in the original, there were technically 2 ways to do it, but they were functionally identical. Except one of them took way longer to do, but it was a passive, so people just did it. But again, bear in mind, you would need rank 8 Anatomy, rank 8 Light, and then you would need to have Prevailing Element ranked up, like, each map. So there was no possible way that you were realistically doing that. So Spellcraft was actually pretty good the whole time, it's just, it was always such a minor amount that, you know, we never really thought about it much. Anyway, so yeah, it's definitely far more of a thing these days. It definitely feels a lot more useful. And it feels, again, like with everything else, just a more quality of life way to handle all of it. That's, like, if there's really one message that I can get across, again, it's just everything has been handled with massive amounts of quality of life in mind. And it has, without covering anything past Chapter 1, it has clearly been designed in such a way that, like, they knew the tricks, they knew the little nuances, they knew the details, they knew the little stuff there. And interesting, did you see that? When he was taking his movement tiles, he actually didn't have the option to pick up the card. I wonder what that's about. Anyway, I'll assume that's just some little quirk of how the graphics work or something. But yeah, there we go. So all of the old building stuff, as you can see, is still just fine. Like, you have an archer built for a short bow with high dexterity. In her case, also high strength. They're going to be doing pretty solid. You have higher levels or higher ranks, yeah, they're going to be doing better. And all it really does is essentially cap off how, you know, insane you can get. So you can't really get to an ultra insane point here, but as much as that seems like, dang it, I wish I could cover more. Again, I can't cover beyond Chapter 1, but as we can see at the very beginning here, like, there's enough wiggle room to the point where if somebody's experiencing this for the first time, they're gonna have a bit of a challenge and they might go back and do a little bit of extra grind. But if you've been through it before, like, you know the mechanics, you can absolutely tweak the mechanics to make pretty much anything work. You can just twist everything to just make it all functional, make it all good. Like, that guy picked up a card. Does that necessarily mean that he has won the fight? Hell no, he's just one dude. As you can see, that thing might have potentially scaled up his damage in some circumstances, but you know what it hasn't done? It hasn't made his armor any better. It hasn't made him any more immortal. He's still one dude, and everyone has a lot of units because a lot of units are not making it to the end of the fight. So there's that, which is funny because the core mechanic of this whole game isn't even necessarily like this combat system. It's supposed to be like just how many different things you can mess with in the story and whatever else. But I still just find myself fascinated by the combination of absolutely all of it. Like, just the fact that you can do so much with the story, the fact that you can twist the mechanics in so many different fun ways. Again, it's technically like it always was, but it's also just better. So, and you know, considering how much I've extensively covered the original, I think you can kind of get the general thing I'm trying to imply on that. Which is like how much it potentially takes to essentially supplant something that I have spent over a decade running, despite technically being, you know, in many ways a similar skeleton to the original as far as I can tell. Like, as you've noticed, everything in Chapter 1 script-wise and all that has more or less been, you know, identical aside from some better rewrites. Actually, a fun little note, I didn't notice this before. They did a better job of explaining a lot of little stuff in the background. So I actually did go through and I double-checked like different like Warren Report entries, again through Chapter 1. And yeah, like for example with Brezin, they mentioned that he had a background and whatever else before, but they just explained that the dude has a whole like illustrious gladiatorial career. That's why he's actually called Sword Fighter. He's never used a sword because he's because he's essentially like a sword gladiator kind of guy, but he prefers a hammer when he goes into actual fights. It's like, they don't mention the preferring a hammer part, it's just a more practical thing, but he's basically a like a hobbyist fencer gladiator sword. He bets money on sword fights. Which is funny because that actually used to be a thing that a lot of folks would turn into a job back in the day. And it's especially weird because there was this one story of this guy that was, I guess it was like some like European swordmaster or something like that. I want to say he was Italian or some such. But yeah, the guy had made a long career out of beating people in duels, and And yeah, apparently at some point some random drunk guy or something, I forget if he was trying to cover his debts or whatever else, but he made a bet with a guy of some ridiculous amounts, where basically it would just be a fight to the death. He bet that he could beat this guy. And said guy apparently was just training for absolutely ages, trying to figure out how to break the guy's foot so that he could basically cheat his way into winning. And by some miracle, he actually pulled it off, and he just like basically took this like Swordmaster guy's toe or something and broke it, and then just basically like shanked him a bunch. It's like, well, I mean, technically a win's a win, I guess. The old Game of Thrones thing comes to mind, like, oh, you know, that wasn't honorable. Like, yeah, well, that guy was honorable. Now he's dead. But anyway. Oh, alright. So yeah, this dry weather is completely messing up my throat, so I probably should wrap up here. But you get the general idea here. You see the overall lines people are holding. You see that the Menders are actually doing a good job of holding themselves in the back. You see that the, generally speaking, the ones that are set to a long-range AI are doing a pretty good job of going and focus firing stuff. You see that the frontliners are doing a good job of using whatever options they have on hand to surround and deal with stuff as they will. Like, just the fact that the AI is actually pretty solid about setting up pincers. Like, they seem to know what units have pincers and which ones don't. So I have seen cases where it seems like they do actually intentionally leave a space for somebody else to set up a pincer. So yeah, that stuff feels good. And dang it, I forget if I mentioned this earlier in the video, but when it comes to the bonus objectives, again, another just like random hot take I saw from somebody that probably saw 5 seconds of the thing and immediately knew their entire opinion about every mechanic in it. But yeah, no, when it comes to the little prizes and things, it's just a little bit of an extra thing. You don't actually have to go out of your way, as you might have noticed. Like, throughout all of Chapter 1, they're like, just maybe bring one of these units along, it might be potentially useful here. So, for example, like right here, they're like, oh, you know, maybe bring an Enchantress or a Wizard, maybe do a debuff. Now, why do you think they're putting that there? Do you remember how you dealt with the dragon in the PSP version? Do you remember the best way to deal with a high defense, low health unit? I mean, granted, they've got a pretty decent amount of health, but yeah, you poison it, you debuff it, you get it out of the way, and there you go. Another thing, actually, as far as the AI goes, I have to say I have yet to see Sistina go down in a single run-through of Chapter 1 yet. So I've run through this probably over a dozen times at this point. It's not just stats either. Like, I can't help but notice that, yeah, she does seem to do a pretty good job of kiting stuff. She seems to do a pretty solid job of not taking suicidal attacks. So there's that. Also, just Valkyries in general just seem more generally useful this time around. Like, they don't seem to have as many armor penetration issues. So there's that. As far as those different numbers flying around, by the way, as I mentioned before, the knockback is just a passive thing that everybody gets. I believe it starts off at a rank 1. I'm not sure if that actually goes up at any point, but it does feel like certain attacks do have a higher chance of knockback. Either way, as with always, it's just you kind of feel it out and kind of see what happens. And so in this particular case, she ended up getting herself surrounded. We'll see how that plays out. But it's fine. We'll be over there in just a moment. So there we go. See, I feel like part of it is that wizard guy previously, when he would start off his round, he would almost always go for Sistina. Like, feels like Valkyries definitely have higher resistance than maybe they did before. But the fact that archers are not doing like roughly 30% damage shots in this particular phase, we can pretty clearly tell here that even though I've left it on AI, that they're still doing a pretty solid job of at least trying to get to her. She's doing a pretty solid job of denying tiles, because now that dragon can't attack her because she's in the corner. If it was a water dragon, that would be a different story, but it's an earth dragon, and essentially she has dead-angled said dragon, so that's fine. This is what I mean by those situations where it seems like they're doing a better job of actually taking those good tiles there. Man. It's just good to see the AI actually doing good stuff here. So, as you can see, they're actually trying to get past that middle point, trying to get past the kind of defensive line, as it were. The Long Rangers are dealing with singling out one unit and getting rid of them. As you know, she didn't really have many other options as far as attacks went, but they're going ahead and taking pokes. But you may notice she technically would have had the option of taking a Fizz card and attacking from the back, because the AI does not have the option to go focus down on cards. That was actually something that many of us were a little bit worried about, that it would become all about the cards, but the AI will pick them up if it's convenient to do so, but they will not charge for them. So in that particular case, the way that the AI saw it was the Valkyrie could run up and they could take a long-range poke and have their next turn happen faster. Whereas the other option would have been to essentially take a similar accuracy attack with the same amount of damage, but spend that cost to pick up the card, and they chose to go for the speed instead. Alright. So in this particular case, it looks like the AI saw the option to cause the enemy to hit itself, so they went ahead and did that there. I'm pretty positive that that's the case, because otherwise they would have just sat in place and taken a stab and called it a day. Accuracy rates in general, as you can probably tell, are drastically higher this time around, because parry chance is more serving that particular role. This actually feels like it's also part of the AI rework, as it were, because when it comes to all of it, previously sometimes the AI would get a little too focused on accuracy. I don't know if anybody actually watched the dang thing, but when it came to the original solo run for the original PSP version, basically was able to solo. Well, okay, it was the PSP version, so this will mean nothing if you haven't played it before, and essentially will potentially mean nothing to many people that even have beaten the original game. But Final Encounter of Coda 4 was a situation that ran into a weird, almost kind of soft lock as I was expecting, due to a particular effect of a particular skill. Anyway, abusing the fact that the guy could basically only, or that they would prefer to take a more guaranteed shot, was basically able to use a combination of different debuffs to kind of dissuade the guy from using a particular finisher. So in some cases, yes, you could kind of manipulate the AI through how they saw accuracy. Anyway, so here we are. Kind of a long-winded way to put it, but as you can see, the AI, just on its own, has managed to break through the initial front line there, has managed to set up their own defensive line, and has actually managed to start threatening the boss here, as well as clear out most of the map, while Sistina is still perfectly active. I have repeated this particular experiment multiple times, so yes, it is. It's not a instant game over scenario if you accidentally hit the wrong button on a speed run. I know that is a very specific subset of people that would be worried about that, but yes, this is absolutely a better situation this time around, because the AI actually does interesting stuff. And as we see right there, the AI clearing a way for their other unit to run up and attack in front of them. Previously, if you told them to attack aggressively, they would simply just stay there. This time, they will actually move out of the way to allow for other attacks to happen. So, you know, solid stuff as far as that goes. And yeah, the voice is practically non-existent at this point, but we'll let them continue on, but I'm pretty sure you get the general idea at this point. So, that will go ahead and pretty much be that there. Hopefully this is given a little bit more to chew on while we wait for Reborn to officially release, and, you know, those days when more info can potentially be shared. But yeah. Man, Chapter 1 is wonderful. Anyway, so you guys have a good one. Take care, and yeah, see you in the next one.